In section 8.4 and section 8.5, we're going to work on simplifying certain expressions that contain roots on the bottom of fractions. When you think of fractions like, say, 3 over 6, that's not considered to be simplified because you can reduce it to lowest terms and get 1/2. In the same way, fractions that have square roots on the bottom are considered to be not simplified. You can have roots on the tops of fractions, that's okay. We just don't like having square roots on the bottom of the fraction. So if we have an expression like 5 over the square root of 2, we need to try to simplify that. Now we can't simplify the square root of 2. So what we're going to do is we're going to use a neat trick, which is that when you multiply a square root by itself, the same type of root and the same thing under the root like that, you're going to get whatever was under the root. So we can get rid of a square root that's on the bottom of a fraction by multiplying the bottom of the fraction by that exact same square root. And to keep the fraction balanced and end up with something equivalent, whatever you multiply by the bottom of the fraction, you have to multiply the same thing by the top of the fraction. So for example, when we have 5 divided by the square root of 2, to get rid of that root on the bottom of the fraction, to do what's called rationalizing the denominator, we multiply by the square root of 2 over the square root of 2. On the top part, there's really nothing we can do with that. We just get 5 square root of 2. But on the bottom part, we have that trick we talked about a minute ago, that when you multiply a square root by itself, you just get what's under the root. The square root of 2 times the square root of 2 is 2. Sometimes my 2's look like z's. I'm sorry about that. So here our answer is 5 square root of 2 divided by 2. So if we have another example here where we want to rationalize the denominator and we have 7 divided by the square root of 3. To figure out what to multiply by to get rid of that root on the bottom, it's easy. You just multiply by that root. And to keep it balanced, we have to multiply the top part by the same thing. And we end up with 7 square root of 3 on top. On the bottom, the square root of 3 times the square root of 3 is 3. Looking at our next one, same sort of thing, 10x divided by the square root of 6. Here, the one we're trying to get rid of on the bottom is the square root of 6, so we multiply by the square root of 6 on the top and the bottom. Whatever square root you're trying to get rid of, that's what you multiply by the top and bottom of the fraction. So here on the top part, we would have 10x square root of 6. On the bottom part, the square root of 6 times the square root of 6 is 6. Now the difference between this one and the ones we've had previously is, here's a case where after we got rid of that root on the bottom, we can reduce it. The top and bottom here are both divisible by 2. So 10 divided by 2 is 5. 6 divided by 2 is 3. And our final answer for this one would be 5x square root of 6 divided by 3. Now, sometimes students say, well, at this point, can't we divide 6 by 3 and divide 3 by 3 and reduce it some more? You can't. To reduce it, one of the things you're using to reduce it they have to be both not under the root. If you have part of it that's under the root and part of it's not, then you can't reduce them that way. All right. So let's take a look at our next example here. Oh, made it too big there. Here we go. Here we've got 2 square root of 9 divided by the square root of 16y. Sometimes you have roots like these where what you're going to really want to do is simplify them first before you think about trying to get rid of the roots. Here on the top part, we can go ahead and simplify the square root of 9 and get 3. So what we've got there on the top is 2 times 3, which is 6. On the bottom, that's one of those roots we can simplify part of it, but not the other. We can simplify the square root of 16 and get 4. Whoa, that needs to switch there. But we can't simplify the square root of y, so that just has to stay under the root sign. So now we need to get rid of the square root of y. So we multiply the top and bottom parts by the square root of y. We can also, if we want to, in the same step, go ahead and reduce it because we notice that 6 and 4 are both divisible by 2. 6 divided by 2 is 3. 4 divided by 2 is 2. So now in the top part, we have 3 times the square root of y. On the bottom part, you have 2, and then the square root of y times the square root of y is y. This is considered to be simplified because even though there's a root on the top part, there's not a root on the bottom part. Roots on the bottom part are bad, so we want to do what's called rationalizing the denominator. Let's try another example. Here we have 8x divided by the square root of 10x. So here, the root you're trying to get rid of is the root you multiply by on the top and the bottom. So we multiply by the square root of 10x over the square root of 10x. On the top part, we just have 8x square root of 10x. And then on the bottom part, the square root of 10x times the square root of 10x is 10x. Now, one thing I notice on this one, we've got an x on the top and the bottom. They cancel each other out completely. We also have 8 and 10 on the top and the bottom, which we can reduce. Those are both divisible by 2. 8 divided by 2 is 4. 10 divided by 2 is 5. So our final answer for this one is 4 square root of 10x over 5, like that. All right, let's try 2 more. These look more complicated, but they're really not. Here, if it helps, you can do it in 2 steps where you think of this as the square root of 7x divided by the square root of 3y. So we've got roots here on both the top and the bottom part. But the one we want to get rid of when you're rationalizing the denominator is the denominator. So we multiply the top and bottom parts by the square root of 3y. On the top part, since they're both under square roots, we can multiply them together and put it under 1 square root. So when we do 7x times 3y, we get the square root of 21xy. On the bottom part, we have that shortcut. The square root of 3y times the square root of 3y is 3y. And we're done. One more example, same kind of thing. Here, we want the root we want to get rid of is on the bottom of the fraction. And that's what we multiply by. So on this one, we need to multiply the top and bottom parts by the square root of 11n. On the top, we have the square root of 55mn. On the bottom part, the square root of 11n times the square root of 11n is the square root of 11n. These are all using that shortcut that when you multiply a square root by itself, you end up with whatever was under the root.